Okay. Thanks for joining us today for Cisco's webinar on making an impact by hiring refugees. It's hosted by the Cisco Talent Bridge team, and we're joined by many brilliant speakers who are going to share their expertise with you. My name is Jessel, and I'll be your event facilitator. And if you have any questions, please post them in the Q&A that we have on the sidebar, and we'll answer them as we go or at the end of the presentation. To start us off, we'll begin with Trent telling us more about how employers can connect with refugees through our network. Next slide, please.
Great, thank you. You'll see here, as Jessel mentioned, we have a lot of great presenters today. I'm Trent Doro. I'm the leader of the Talent Bridge program. Next slide. And really our goal of the Talent Bridge program is to connect qualified candidates to your jobs. So we source candidates from a variety of resources, but the one that we're focusing on today are refugees. And while this initiative was kicked off due to the Ukraine war, we have not focused solely in that geography. We understand it's a global crisis, so we're trying to help refugees from a global stance. At the middle of our Talent Bridge program, the real crux and the flagship product is the matching engine. And this is a free online platform that connects more than 75,000 candidates to your jobs. And these are diverse candidates with diverse skill sets. So those candidates come from a global population, and they have diverse skills, both technical and non-technical skills. So I understand, we are targeting technology companies, but we also understand that you run a business, and that business has non-technical roles as well, including admin, finance, HR, marketing, sales. And so we are pulling candidates from all sorts of skill sets to help satisfy those needs in your business. And I'm going to give you a very quick demonstration of the platform, and this will just give you a good overview of how easy the platform is to use, how to post a job, and review matching candidates. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm logged in as an employer on the matching engine, and you'll see all navigation is done from this one recruitment button and the drop-down menu associated. And if you first log in, you'll be asked to set up your recruiter profile, and from there you have the ability to post an opportunity. Instead of posting a new opportunity today, I'll just show you one that's already posted, and so the fields will already be populated. But this is a full-time position, but you could choose whether it's part-time, contract, internship. This is listed as a technical position, but as mentioned before, we do have non-technical roles and non-technical candidates. And then the title and the short description is entered, along with open and close dates and the location or locations where you're willing to let the employee sit. You can also indicate whether it's open for refugees and remote work. On the next tab is where you would put in your full-length job description. And on the third tab is where you enter required and desired skills. So required skills will limit the candidate pool to individuals that meet the requirements, and the desired skills will stack rank those existing candidates that meet the requirements. So individuals that have more desired skills will be ranked higher than the individuals that have fewer desired skills. And on the last tab, you make your selections as related to language. And again, there are required and desired options here. After posting your job, one of the advantages of the matching engine is you will immediately see how many matching candidates you have. So in this instance, we have 3,788 candidates. And in order to see the matches, you simply click the matches hyperlink, and this will give you the ability to see all the candidates in a list view in a stacked ranked order based on a 5-star rating system. And again, that 5-star rating system is based on all of them will meet the required skills, and then it'll be ranked on the desired skills. How many the individuals that have more desired skills will be ranked higher. And I apologize, my internet's running a little slow today. Here we go. So again, you'll notice this list view in descending order. And at this point, we have the ability to what I call bucketize candidates. So after you drill down into their name, by drilling down into the name, you'll gather more information regarding their contact information, certifications, education, skill sets. But if you like a candidate, you could put them in the yes tab. If you're hesitant or questionable, you could put them in the maybe tab. And if you're not interested, you could hit the X and reject them. You can also do this on a mass scale by doing multi-select and then choosing the check mark, question mark, X box up above. These are matching candidates, but I'm going to go ahead and filter by applications. So these are individuals that have seen the job, are interested, and have applied. And while that's refreshing, you'll also notice some search bars up at the top. So you can filter by geography, further drill down. This actions, this filter gives you the ability to filter by refugees, which we'll definitely focus on here in just a moment. But these are applicants, and one of the advantages or one of the additional features you receive when you view an applicant profile is they'll have 3 tabs available when it loads. One will be the candidate profile, the second tab will be a skills tab, and the third tab will be the application tab. And that application tab will house the resume. So here's the 3 tabs. You'll notice this candidate is actually a refugee. This green logo associated to their profile is the refugee logo. The gold dog tag logo indicates that they're a veteran, and the Cisco Networking Academy indicates that they took courses in the Cisco Networking Academy program. They also have some Credly badges associated to their profile and additional contact information. The second tab, as mentioned, is the skills tab, where they indicate years of experience based on different technical and non-technical skills. And the third tab is the application tab that houses their resumes. You can now click the icon, download the resume, and get a more complete work history. But that's really the crux functionality of the matching engine, the ability to post a job, set requirements on that job, and then review your matching candidates. And and then bucketize or prioritize the candidates, and then start your outreach. Again, this can be treated as a reactive or a proactive tool. Reactive meaning you can wait for the applications to come in, or proactive in the sense that you could look at your matching candidates, view the ones that you're interested in, and then start to proactively reach out to the candidates that make sense for you and your organization. So again, to recap, this is a free global tool that's put in place to help you as an employer connect with candidates and be able to filter those candidates by the appropriate skills, certifications, location. And again, here's where you can filter down by refugee status or any one of these other statuses as well. So thank you for your time today. I hope you gain a lot of value out of this tool and the content that's going to be presented after me. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass the ball to the next presenter.
Thanks, Trent. And next, we're going to have Fabio from the UNHCR shed light upon the real-world implications refugees face currently. If you could advance it to the next slide, please. And Fabio, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Jessel, for introducing me. So let's start by having, we can go to the next slide, an overview of what are currently active situations around the globe, just to give you an idea of how many countries and how many continents, in this case 4 out of 5 continents, see situations generating refugees. So we have some of these pins that you can see on the map that are, let's say, at the moment at the center stage also in the international press. So you have Ukraine war crisis, we have Iraqi, we have Yemen, we have the Myanmar and the Rohingya situation, or we have Venezuela and Central America. So this was just a brief overview. You can connect to the link and see more details about each of these situations. We call it situations because they are not only or exclusively refugee situations. We will touch upon these on the next slide, please. The next one, it's the other way around. So the countries that are actually hosting populations of concern for UNHCR, population UNHCR serves. Who's the population of concern for UNHCR? Obviously refugees, but also asylum seekers, so persons who have requested to be recognized as refugees are pending that recognition. We have internally displaced people. So refugees, a person that due to threats, direct threats to his life, has been forced to flee his country, to move from the place he was living. An internally displaced person is a person that for the same reason has been obliged to flee, but has not crossed an international boundary. So he didn't cross the frontier of his own country. So he's displaced inside his own country. We also have stateless people and others of concern. So as you can see, and this data, you can see on the map, it's before was collected before the Ukraine war started. So the countries actually hosting refugees are the majority of the country we can see on the map. Next slide. So in recent years, the number of people forcibly displaced around the world has been growing and growing. So we have an additional, by last data in June, there was an additional 5.1 million that were generated by the crisis in Ukraine. Majority of refugee situations are protracted situation, means that people live in exile for an average of 10 years, but we have cases of people living 20, 25, or living for the rest of their life in another country. Just to, let's say, talk about myth busters, we normally tend to believe that refugees live in camps. It's only true for the 22% of refugees and asylum seekers. Majority of them actually live in urban environments. On the bottom right of this slide, you can see a bit the differences in between the different, let's say, categories we have. So we have a total number of almost 90 million who are forcibly displaced. Of these forcibly displaced people, more than 50 millions are internally displaced, so they didn't cross any frontier. 27 million are recognized refugees, while 4.6 are asylum seekers. Then we have a special category for the Venezuela situations. So we call them Venezuelans displaced abroad, because they contain obviously numbers that are referring to refugees, but also to migrants. Next slide. So we have seen who are the refugees, where they're standing, but it's important to understand that the majority, the 83%, so the overwhelming majority of refugees live in developing countries. So that's a very important information to have to understand on which kind of economies are they putting pressure at the moment. So only 4.6 are hosted in developed economies. And on the right, you can see the countries that are hosting more refugees. They, out of 5 countries, top 5 countries, they represent basically 4 different continents. We see Europe. Actually, we see Turkey. It's in between Europe and Asia. We see America. We see Africa, and we see Asia. There are many positive impacts, to give you an idea of the information we have right now on the impacts of refugees, population, and refugee movements. We had a study in Roraima, which is a state located in the north of Brazil, bordering Venezuela, very rural and remote areas. And this study gave us results that the presence of Venezuelans over there gave a huge boost to the local economy in terms of number of activities, in terms of employment, and strictly talking in terms of revenues for the government, so tax revenues. So there was a hugely positive impact on a depressed economy. There are impact also in terms of economic growth. We have seen studies done by the World Bank in Peru, for example, in which there is a 0.5% growth that is linked to the arrival of Venezuelans in Peru. which is a huge number on an economy like the one of Peru. There are also some negative impacts, majority of them due to the fact that there is no integration or economic inclusion policy in place. So, for example, we have been noticing that there is a sort of negative mechanism. If refugee is not allowed to work because there's no work permit or is not recognized as a refugee, so the right to work is not attached to that, obviously they are employed informally, and many times they are obliged to accept let's say salaries, informal salaries, that are lower than the national, so creating a sort of negative circle. This is because there is no inclusion or integration policy in place, which could avoid these issues. Obviously, there is also an issue with the pressure that is posed on infrastructure and services like health system or school systems. But it's also true the other way around. There are some remote areas, above all in camp-based situations, in which those services like school and health are not present because it's a remote area for the government. But due to the camp, which hosts health facilities and school facilities, also local community can access those facilities. So there are cases in which services are created for refugees and then accessed by the wider community. So it's always important to see why things are happening and which is the other side of the story. Next slide. On the next one, I would like to present something more specific on the issues of employment, so barriers to employment. Because obviously people who move are very eager to find a livelihood, so a way, lifeline, earn basically enough money to make their end meets. The main barriers are legal or administrative barrier. Legal barrier, obviously, there is no right to work, de facto or de jure. So sometimes people have the right to work, but there are too many administrative barriers. Means, I don't know, the private sector, for example, does not recognize the refugee identity document. So that might be barriers related to the software that are used, in which you cannot even enter the number of the ID of a refugee person. So there are a number of barriers that prevent the refugees. We have collected a lot of information coming from private sector and other stakeholders, so from employers, refugees, governments, civil society, and together with OECD, we developed this document, which is an action document. It's an action plan in which basically we identify what's the role of any of these stakeholders, what the role that any of these stakeholders should play in order to facilitate employment. We have issues, for example, private sector strongly hit on the issue of legal certainty. What does it mean? Refugees or asylum seekers might have the right to work, but the private sector companies, they do not know that, or they do not know the validity of the documents they are supporting this right to work. So very simply, if they see a risk, they decide not to hire people to avoid risk of being fined by the government. So we have a situation in which there are no legal barriers, but still employment is not possible because private sector doesn't know about that. So there's a huge work to be done for sensitization. So the document proposes concrete actions in which UNHCR can facilitate, but it's the government who should be sitting there and giving private sector that legal background, informations about that legal background, in order to solve this issue and let the company hire refugees freely because they have legal certainties. We can go to the next slide. So just to give you an idea of why employing refugees, what are the opportunities, not only for the refugees, but for the companies hiring refugees. So for the private sector, we have programs in many different countries that we will see in the next slide. But on this one, I wanted to put emphasis on the fact that, for example, we collected data from a local integration program we have in Mexico that it's in partnership with many private sector companies. And the companies hiring refugees gave us, their feedback that they had a huge positive impact in terms of turnover. So 0.7% is the percentage of turnover, so it's a low turnover in their workforce, in the refugee workforce. It's much lower than the national average. So there is a positive impact because people staying longer can obviously be better trained and have a positive impact on productivity. So inclusiveness, diversity has a positive impact on productivity. There is also a Harvard Business School study who basically highlighted these, and that some of the companies, even another study from Boston Consulting Group, have 19% more revenues due to innovation that is refugee-led. Refugees might have stronger skills than the nationals and might have skills that are not available at the moment on the market. So there are a number of opportunities out there for private sector companies. Next slide. Very quickly, these are just few of the programs we are having here in the Americas, in the region, in which basically private sector is involved, and we are facilitating the employment of refugees. We have platforms, for example, Empresas con Personas Refugiadas, which are there to help private sector share its experience in hiring people, so that other company can learn from their experiences, if it's a positive experience and which kind of impact that the hiring refugees had, and also how did they hire, administratively speaking. We have Talentos Sin Fronteras, Talents Without Borders, in which basically we help support the employability of people. We help them understand how to structure an interview, how to write a CV. We have initiatives with ministries like in El Salvador to support the first employment. We have a sello, it's a seal, inclusive and enterprise. So it's basically a seal who recognize those companies who are supportive of the refugee employment. We go to the next slide. These are some of the companies we are partnering with. Majority of them, we are not partnering in the sense that they are giving UNHCR funds money, but they are hiring people, or they are facilitating the hiring of people, or providing services like financial or microfinancial services. These are some of the companies, just to give you an idea of who we are working with, who we are partnering with. So you can go to the next one. I think this is all. Obviously, I'm here available for any further question or inquiry you might have. Thanks a lot for hosting me.
Thank you, Fabio. Next up, we'll have Shai from TENT for Partnership for Refugees present, and she's going to share best practices for supporting refugees in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Jezzel. Thank you, Cisco, for having me. And thank you, everybody, for joining this session and for showing your interest in hiring refugees. I'm Shai. I am one of our U.S. partnerships managers at the TENT Partnership for Refugees, and we help companies integrate refugees into their workforces. Next slide, please. So in terms of what you can expect from my 10-minute presentation, I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about TENT. I'm then going to talk about the business benefits of hiring refugees. And lastly, we'll talk about how you can set up a refugee hiring program at your company. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll either answer them live or after my presentation. Next slide, please. So let's start off with some background about TENT. TENT was founded by Hamdi Ulukaya, who is the founder and CEO of a billion-dollar food company in the US called Chobani. For those of you that are based in the US, you've probably eaten a cup of Chobani yogurt. And Hamdi founded TENT based off of his own experience hiring a significant number of refugees in his manufacturing plants in Idaho and in upstate New York. And what Hamdi learned from his experience was that hiring refugees isn't just a really wonderful thing to do from a moral standpoint, which of course it is. It's a really smart business decision He found that, for example, refugees are incredibly hardworking and loyal employees, and that they have higher retention rates than the average employee, which is what Fabio alluded to earlier on. He also found that Chobani was able to increase employee engagement among non-refugee employees because people want to work for companies that are doing good, and also had brand and reputational benefits because consumers want to buy from companies that are doing good. So having seen all these business benefits, next slide, please, Hamdi decided to found Tent in 2016 with the mission of mobilizing other business leaders and the private sector at large to integrate refugees into their workforces and into their business operations. Next slide. And now, just a few years later, we manage a partnership of over 250 leading companies, including Cisco and some other recognizable logos you can see here on the screen, who are supporting refugees all over the world. Our main geographic focuses are North America, so US, Canada, and Mexico, as well as Europe, both Eastern and Western Europe, and Latin America. We work specifically with large companies, so companies with over 2,000 employees or over $500 million in revenue, and we provide them with free pro bono support to help them build and implement effective refugee-focused initiatives, whether that's hiring and training programs, mentorship programs, supply chain initiatives, or other type of work-focused programs. And today we'll, of course, be discussing hiring, which is where we really think that companies can have the most impact on this issue. Next slide. So now that you know a little bit about Tent, let's move on to the business case. Next slide, please. The first business benefit that we've been speaking a lot about is higher retention rates. So we've been hearing this anecdotally from our member companies for many years, and we wanted to see if this was actually true. So we conducted research in partnership with a leading US think tank, the Fiscal Policy Institute, looking at refugees as employees at over 30 companies. And what we found is that refugees indeed have much lower turnover rates than the average employee. So this slide, for example, is of the manufacturing industry, where we found that refugees have 3 times lower turnover. And if your business faces the challenge of high turnover rate, which we know is a really big problem right now during the Great Quit, refugees can be an excellent source of loyal talent. Next slide. Another business benefit is around the positive consumer perceptions and positive reputational benefits. So in a recent survey that we did with NYU Stern School of Business, which surveyed over 6,000 US consumers, we asked consumers whether they'd be more or less likely to buy from a company that is involved in helping refugees. And what we found was a very positive response, as you can see from the slide here. 63% of consumers said they are more likely to buy from a company that they see as supporting refugees. And remarkably, this scored higher than how consumers respond to companies selling environmentally friendly products and fair trade products. The survey also showed that certain consumer profiles are especially receptive to hiring refugees. These include Gen Z and millennial consumers, female consumers, people of color, as well as consumers with higher incomes and higher education levels. Next slide. So in addition to the lower turnover rates and to the brand and reputational benefits from a consumer perspective, there's also the competitive advantage that your business can see in attracting and retaining employees, non-refugee talent. Simply put, employees want to work for companies that are doing the right thing, and they stay longer at companies that share the same values as they do. Next slide. And of course, while at Tent, we really talk a lot about the business benefits, let's not forget that at the end of the day, you'll be making an impact on somebody's life, on somebody's family's life. And so you're not just having a positive effect on your bottom line, you're having a positive effect on your double bottom line, your financial performance alongside your social impact. Next slide. All right, next slide. Hopefully many of you are interested in hiring refugees, and that's why you showed up to this session today. And so I want to lay out a few key steps for how you can set up a refugee hiring program. Again, if you have over 2,000 employees or over $500 million in revenue, Tent can help you set up a program for free. But if you cannot, then there's a lot of other resources and a lot of best practices that you can still tap into. Here on the screen is just a few examples of companies in the Tent Partnership that are doing incredible work hiring refugees. Next slide, please. Great. So there are 5 key steps that we've identified for setting up a refugee hiring program. The first step is to identify a lead for your refugee hiring program. This is somebody who is going to really be in charge of setting the internal strategy and driving it forward and connecting different stakeholders. Typically, it's somebody from your HR or diversity and inclusion team. The second step, once you identify a lead for your refugee hiring program, is to identify your pilot location. So 1 or 2 locations where you have the largest operations, the largest hiring needs, and of course, also these locations need to be in close proximity to a sizable refugee population nearby. And you can find that out by doing a quick Google search. We also have some wonderful resources that I'll talk about a little bit later that can also help you figure out where there are large refugee populations near your operations. 3, after you identify the location and where you want to pilot your refugee hiring program, the next step is to identify which roles refugees can fill at your business. Refugees have a wide range of educational backgrounds and skills and language capabilities. So we strongly encourage companies to consider hiring refugees at all skill levels, from vocational roles to high-skilled managerial roles. And once you've identified the locations, the next thing you'll want to do is connect with local refugee-focused organizations that can help you recruit talent. Building strong relationships with local refugee-focused organizations is key to creating a talent pipeline and to creating a successful hiring program. You can't do it alone, and there are lots of partners that can help you, so rely on them. In the US, for example, there are 9 national refugee resettlement agencies that have hundreds of local affiliates all over the country. And in other countries that are not the US, there are various nonprofits and governmental organizations that you can work with as well. After you find a local partner and build really strong relationships with them, the next thing you'll want to do is educate your HR team and your managers on best practices for recruiting, onboarding, integrating, and creating a welcoming environment for refugee talent. For tent members, we have monthly training sessions on corporate engagement with refugees. We also have monthly working group calls. But it's really, really important that you continuously educate your HR team and create that internal buy-in and that excitement around this work. Next slide. In addition to the sessions that we offer to members, we also have these publicly available guidebooks for businesses that you can find at our website, tent.org. And I just want to highlight a few that I think could be particularly relevant for this group. So for example, we have a wonderful guidebook on best practices for integrating refugees with limited local language proficiency. This is a global guidebook. It's applicable for refugees coming from anywhere to any market. And this includes case studies of tent member companies and practical solutions that they implemented at all stages of the talent management cycle to recruit and integrate refugees and to make sure they are being set up for success, even if they're still learning the local language. Another guidebook I want to highlight is one that we developed in partnership with Deloitte on best practices for inclusion in the workspace, which also shares a lot of wonderful case studies. And my colleagues that are joining us, if you could just share a few of these guidebooks in the chat for people to see, that would be wonderful. We also have a great US-focused employer's guide on hiring Afghan refugees, which is a really wonderful HR 101 document with everything a talent acquisition professional would need to know to start this work. And so even if you're starting from scratch and you're a relatively small company, you can really do wonderful and impactful work using these guidebooks and these resources on our website. For those of you who will be content members, you'll have access to a whole library of exclusive trainings and content and resources and strategy development. Next slide. All right, so that is it for me. Thank you again for joining the session. If your company does meet our criteria, please email me. I would love to set up some time to chat with you and discuss this opportunity in more depth. If your company does not meet the threshold, please still check out the public resources I mentioned. And I hope you found this presentation useful, and looking forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Shai, for your presentation. Next up, we'll have Ben from EY to share examples from Australia's immigration perspective.
Hi, thanks everyone. Ben Willis is my name. I'm the partner leading immigration for EY. I'm based in London, but as some of you may tell by my accent, I originally hail from Australia. So if we can just proceed to the next slide. So a lot of countries are doing their piece for paving the way for refugees to be holding the right visas and immigration documentations as part of the employer-sponsored routes. And similar to what you've seen already, the Australian government has joined up with the group Talent Beyond Boundaries to basically put together another, I want to say, matchmaking platform whereby employers can receive a streamlined benefit through the immigration process to obtain refugee workers into the country. So I've worked in Australian immigration for a long time. It does have a very robust system. And as you look at the eligibility requirements for becoming employed on a visa in Australia, it can be quite difficult. And so what they've done here is they've put through a streamlined, efficient process, and they've waived a number of waived a number of requirements, so given concessions to make the process smoother. So they're using the typical offerings for employment-sponsored visas. So some of these visas, or one particular visa, is straight to permanent residency, and then the other two visas are under the temporary process. However, at each stage, what they've done is made the elements and the requirements a lot less. So things like the level of skills, you don't need to demonstrate or evidence them. Minimum work experience is waived. They've made some concessions around age, English language ability, which has always proved difficult for some people coming from certain countries, has been reduced to a lower level, and salary levels have been reduced as well. So again, really trying to streamline the process, really trying to make it efficient, and it's proving to be successful in its own right. So if I can just move to the next slide. So just a little about the process. It's not a difficult process. It does require some documents and effort on behalf of the employer to get registered. So the first thing, obviously, is an employer can just register their vacancies and connect with TBB. They can then start looking for candidates and being as that matchmaking that I referred to earlier. They then proceed to get registered with the Australian government and make the application process. And then, of course, there's the travel in country with the additional support. I do know that EY itself have processed visas for companies in Australia under this particular program, and EY itself has also employed people under this very program. So it is working. It has been successful, and it's really, all of those things you've heard about matching the talent and the loyalty and everything else that goes for the business case is being demonstrated in the Australian program. It's not just limited to Australia, and I think it's really important. This is just one country. There are similar programs, UK, Canada, etc. So highly encourage you to reach out, to find out what is available outside of the US, because there are many programs available. So I'll hand over to back to the US now.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Finally, we have Christy from Fragamon Worldwide, who is going to share American immigration examples.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having Fragamen here. I'm Christy Navarez, and I'm the U.S. engagement partner for Fragamen. Just have one slide to share and just a little bit of information about what I know the focus today is on refugees, but just wanted to talk a little bit about Cisco's commitment to inclusion and diversity and how they've been successful in supporting displaced persons and bringing them into Cisco's immigration program. We've been working with Cisco's Employee Mobility Services team, which has done a fantastic job under Kyle D'Souza's leadership to help identify employees who might need additional support. And just to go over from a work authorization perspective, how Cisco has recognized the talent and then supported them in their work authorization to ensure that both Cisco remains compliant and their employees have some options to take a look at. So maybe just to start with some general definitions, and we went over a little bit of that with our previous speakers, but a refugee is someone who applies for protection and status while outside of the United States, and when entering the United States already has work authorization in hand. So if you are part of a program that works with compliance issues or determining work authorization through the US I-9 program, as a refugee enters the United States, they are work authorized. The document they would use to complete the I-9 documentation is an I-94 card. They're also able to apply for an employment authorization document or an EAD. And they have that status when they walk in. So there is nothing extra that you as a company have to do to secure that immediate work authorization. In addition to that, they have some options to be able to apply for permanent residence in the United States or a green card. And they can do that within the first year that they're here in the United States. So while there's no extra sponsorship per se that Cisco needs to provide, or any of you as a company sponsor needs to provide, what's important is being able to provide that support to the employee along the way. For asylees, it's a little bit different. Asylees are people who are meeting the similar requirements but are physically already inside the United States. So because they didn't enter the United States as refugees, they don't have immediate work authorization. They have to apply for that work permit or that employment authorization document, and that does take some time. And so you will have to make sure, again, you're working with the employee or the candidate to ensure that they have work authorization at the time the job needs to be filled. There is also a path for permanent residence or for a green card for asylees, and the timing is a little bit different. After that asylum case is granted, after a year, they can apply for a green card process as well. And so within that year, you're looking at being well on your way to be a permanent resident here in the United States. The other thing I wanted to mention just briefly is that there is another group of employees, and again, Cisco has a lot of experience in supporting DACA, or deferred action for childhood arrivals. If you've looked in the news recently, you know that this program is being met with a lot of scrutiny from an appellate court right now. And the administration that we have right now is also looking to promulgate regulations to ensure that the DACA program that was started during the Obama era has some ability to have some tenure and to last, but there are some questions that are being raised right now. But someone who qualifies under the DACA program is also eligible to apply for that work permit, which again complies with all of the I-9 requirements, so no worries from a compliance perspective. They're also entitled to renewals of that work permit. And even though the processing time is getting longer and longer from the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service, there are other methods to ensure that the timing is less of an issue for that continued work authorization. I think in the chat, we're going to go ahead and put the link to Fragamen's contact information. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of Cisco's partners have on any of these programs, on how to ensure compliance from a work authorization perspective in the United States, and happy to follow up with anyone who would like to reach out at a later time. Giselle, back to you.
Thank you so much, Christy. And with that, if anyone has any questions, please submit them. We have some links right here. And if you would like to connect with Christy from Fragment, I am putting that link in the chat window right now. And it's submitted right now. And it's looking like right now we don't have any questions. So thank you to everyone who's joined us and our panelists. You've provided a great amount of information, a lot for us to process and go through. And we hope we've encouraged many of you to consider and start moving forward in the refugee hiring process. We're all here for you to work through that process. There are a lot of us working towards this, trying to make sure that we can make the world a better place for refugees to get into the workforce. So please connect with us, and thank you so much for joining us today.